We are into the final weeks of the US presidential election. A bit before polling day, anyway. The US being what it is, it could end up being weeks before we know what the result of the election actually is. Some commentators are saying that if Donald Trump wins, and the polls may be favourable to him, but it's all still on a knife edge really, and that will end the period of normal politics. Now, often that's contextualised based on who's talking. So the Financial Times this week carried a piece saying a Trump victory would end normal politics between the UK and the US. It was an argument that was attached to the somewhat artificial row that the Trump campaign had kicked off over UK Labour Party activists going to America to campaign for his opponent, Kamala Harris. For all that the British media obsessed about it for several days, wasn't really an important story. But the fact is that, yes, if Trump wins, Keir Starmer has a significant problem. Not because some of these activists doing what they have done for countless past elections, not even because his Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, is on record as having said mean things about Trump in the past, although no doubt that will make things a bit more difficult and more personal. But more because Trump is a symptom of the shifting of the world order, from the rules-based order that the Brits and the other Europeans support, which America itself helped to construct, back to a might makes right world, which rewards those with power to break the rules as and when it suits them. Trump is a transactional politician amongst other things, and the brutal truth is that Keir Starmer, and Britain more generally, doesn't have that much that he wants or needs. Not only that, but Trump is fully aware that Britain needs its special relationship with America far more than the reverse, so he knows he can casually exploit the power imbalance for his benefit, maybe even for his entertainment, and certainly Keir Starmer's discomfort. Keir Starmer should be getting used to discomfort, though. This week he travelled a long and arduous path to attend the biannual Heads of the Commonwealth Summit. However, some of the most important other heads of Commonwealth countries were not in attendance. Narendra Modi of India, Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa. They chose instead to go to Russia, where Vladimir Putin has been hosting the BRICS summit. You couldn't get a starker illustration of how the centres of power are shifting across the world. What is the point now of the Commonwealth, you might ask yourself? Apparently as a forum for a number of former British colonies to demand massive payments from Britain as reparations for its part in the historical slave trade, a call which Keir Starmer, soon to unveil something of an austerity budget back in the UK, will have no hesitation, or possibly even choice, in rejecting. But it will be an embarrassment to him nonetheless. The real action, though, is now between the West, and whatever will happen to it with a second Trump term, and the growing bloc of emergent countries who reject the West's role and demand a new world order where they take their place, and that is coalescing around the BRICS organisation, or at least that's what some of the key power brokers hope. A hope that will have been strengthened by the news this week that the International Monetary Fund has released updated predictions for the global economy. They revised downwards expected economic growth from the United States, from Germany, from Japan, and revised upwards the contribution of key BRICS members like China, India, Russia and Brazil. At this summit, President Vladimir Putin proclaimed the start of a new world order as he planned to more than double the size of the BRICS bloc, with various countries wanting to align themselves with it, bringing Xi Jinping of China, as well as the leaders of Iran, Egypt, the UAE, Ethiopia and Egypt, in addition to the aforementioned India and South Africa, helped Putin to send the message to the world that attempts to make him a pariah in the eyes of that world have not been successful. Also, arguably, he was supported by the attendance of the UN Secretary-General, Antonio Guterres, who defended his attendance by pointing out that BRICS now represents half the world's population. This, Putin would like to suggest, means that Russia's war against Ukraine has now become accepted as a new normal in this world order. That didn't entirely go all his way, with various leaders of the summit calling for an end to the war, or at least no escalation, bearing in mind that the idea of North Korean troops fighting in Ukraine, as seems likely right now, is viewed by many as the sort of escalation that could extend it to becoming a wider conflict, maybe even a world war. And this gets to an underlying weakness right now within the BRICS coalition. For all that its leaders are largely united in criticism of the West, there's actually rather a lot of important geopolitical questions they remain utterly divided on. And in particular, China and India, the two largest nations of people in the world, they disagree on most things, and they're not the only ones. Nevertheless, Putin had cause to be well pleased this week, having hosted a summit so powerful, so full of people who at least have that hostility to the West as a common meeting point, which is one reason why breaking the dominance of the US dollar was one of the key points of discussion. Russia's vulnerability to sanctions has been largely facilitated by the role of the US dollar as the de facto global currency, and other countries see themselves as likewise having a keen interest to make themselves less vulnerable to an America that, under Trump, by the way, would be expected to be more unpredictable and more self-interested. And this is the point. It is now highly likely that the momentum shift in world power away from America to the discomfort of those who have historically been its allies is set to accelerate, thanks to Trump. I mean, if Trump wins the coming election, and assuming he does at least some of the things he's talked about doing, we will see more of an isolationist America slapping tariffs on all its international trade partners and aggressively against certain targets such as China. One might argue that his transactional approach will make NATO more or less dysfunctional, since it will no longer be possible to rely on any defence guarantee that America has made as part of the pact. But the truth is that the Europeans have largely come to that conclusion anyway, regardless of who wins next month. The fact is that Trump has this highly isolationist worldview. He has zero apparent interest in loyalty to allies, since they're all weaker than the US, so exist only to be bullied by him. He is an admirer of, and an intended practitioner of, the might makes right new world order that China and Russia expect to see. He thinks that will be a good thing because he presumes that America will remain on top of that particular pile, and his leadership, he thinks, will help it to remain so. And with all of that in plain sight, it's still highly likely that half of the population of the United States will be happy to vote for him. So whether he wins or he loses on this specific occasion, that is taken by Europeans generally as a sign that America has become unstable and unreliable. Who knows what they might do in 4 years' time? Its promises may not be kept. Its perception of its interests may vary wildly from election to election. And its own democracy is unstable, with a polarised society closer to civil conflict than has been seen for more than a century. So yes, Macron's call for strengthened independent European defence measures are increasingly being mainstreamed. And we saw this week, as a by-the-by, an agreement between Britain and Germany on defence and security, with the countries looking to work together to develop drones and a new long-range missile, because all of this is part of a process of adapting. America and its allies used to see themselves as united by common values in democracy, common values in a rules-based world order, for all that America wouldn't always live up to those values. Now the disinformation attacks on democracies by Russia and China and Iran, such as we saw in the latest Moldova election, the Georgia elections, for instance, the sources of such disinformation have now become endemic. to US politics. With increasingly less interest in what's true versus what's useful in terms of power plays for basis for a common platform that previously made up the free world has already crumbled. So yes, we're seeing a period of change. Yes, that change is going to be messy, it's going to be noisy, and while Donald Trump may accelerate it and may take a lot of the attention, it's actually not going to be much about him at all. So let's keep our heads, while all about are losing theirs, and take a keen interest in the dynamics of how this thing is going to play out in the coming months and years.